Story 1. I used to think the scariest things happened far from home, in abandoned houses, dark forests, or haunted hotels you hear about in ghost stories. I never thought my well-lit, familiar bedroom could become the stage for the most terrifying night of my life. But sometimes it's not about where you are. It's about what follows you into the silence when no one else is supposed to be there. It started as an unusually quiet Thursday night. I was curled up in bed with a book, the warm yellow glow of my lamp pooling across the pages. The house seemed calm, almost comforting, with the occasional creak and sigh of wood. I'd lived here long enough to know the sounds. At least I thought I did. I turned a page, and that's when I heard it, faint but clear. Footsteps. At first I froze. Maybe I imagined it, I told myself. Houses have a way of shifting, expanding, contracting with unseen rhythms. But this wasn't the low groan of wood or the click of pipes. This was the measured thud, thud, thud of feet pressing against the hallway floorboards. I held my breath, listening. The sound came again, closer now, heavy but strangely slow, like someone was taking their time. My chest tightened. I was alone. I knew I was alone. And then they stopped, right outside my door. For a moment, the silence was worse than the footsteps, stretching longer and sharper until I could hear the furious pounding of my heart in my ears. I waited, clutching the book in my lap as if I could defend myself with it, every muscle in my body rigid with dread. Finally, summoning whatever shaky courage I had left, I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. My hand trembling, I slid off the bed and padded barefoot to the door. Sitting in my own fear felt worse than facing it head-on. I hesitated, my palm hovering just above the handle, before I flung the door open. The hallway stretched out before me, dim and empty. No one there. I laughed nervously, relieved and embarrassed. It had to be my imagination. Just house noises, nothing more. Yet even as the rational part of my mind tried to settle me, the faintest sound reached my ears. Footsteps again. Slow, deliberate, retreating deeper into the house. Every part of me screamed, "Close the door, go back to bed." But something stronger pulled me forward. Curiosity? Yes, but also the unsettling thought that maybe someone was inside. I couldn't just ignore it. The air in the hallway felt thick as I crept forward, each step a fragile echo of my own. I moved toward the staircase, straining to hear. The sound had drifted downward into the living room. I leaned over the banister, peering into the shadows below. The living room was cloaked in darkness, furniture hulking like shapeless figures. The faint glow from the street lamp outside touched only the corners, leaving the center swallowed in black. And then, creak. Just by the couch, as if someone had shifted their weight. My throat went dry. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a forgotten umbrella leaning against the wall, and gripped it like a sword. Step by careful step I descended, heart hammering at every groan of the stairs beneath me. At the bottom, I waited, straining my ears. Silence. Crushing, unnatural silence. I swept the room with my eyes. Nothing. Only emptiness and shadows. I let out a shaky breath and backed toward the light switch. But before I could flick it on, the footsteps started again, right behind me. I spun, swinging the umbrella wildly into the air. It hit nothing but emptiness. Yet unmistakably, horribly, I still heard retreating steps, circling me, moving into the hallway, going deeper into the house. That was when I realized something. The steps weren't random, they were leading me. I didn't want to follow, not anymore, but my legs betrayed me. The sound shifted toward the basement door, a place I hadn't been in weeks, dusty and cold. The door was ajar. I swear I never left it that way. Holding the umbrella like my only tether to sanity, I pushed the door open. The smell of damp concrete hit me, thick and musty. The footsteps descended the stairs, slow and deliberate, but I couldn't see anything in the swallowing dark below. "Who's there?" I rasped, my voice shaking. Silence. Then, from below, 3 loud steps. Heavy. Closer. I felt a chill spread through me so deep it rooted me where I stood. And suddenly, I understood. Whatever this was, it wanted me downstairs. Slowly, deliberately, I closed the door. The footsteps stopped instantly, cut off as if they'd been waiting for me to make a choice. I turned, stumbling back to my room, slamming the door shut, locking it, and curling up in bed. Still, I couldn't sleep, because even now I hear them, moving again, pacing the hallway outside my door, not retreating this time, waiting. And I know sooner or later the door won't hold. Story 2. I never really feared my house. Why would I? It was small, ordinary, and familiar. The kind of place you stop noticing because it becomes part of your daily rhythm. But the night everything changed, I realized something terrifying. You don't need monsters under the bed or ghosts in the attic to destroy your peace. Sometimes the house itself starts speaking back. It began with the smallest sound. I was sprawled on the couch, half distracted by my phone, when I heard it. A gentle knock from the wall just behind me. Not loud, not urgent, just tap, tap, tap. I frowned, barely looking up. Old house, old pipes. Buildings have secret ways of groaning and shifting, right? That's what I told myself. But then it happened again. Louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. I turned, staring at the plain white wall. Nothing. Silence stretched on, as if the house was holding its breath. I shook my head and went back to scrolling, but a minute later, the knocking came once more. This time it carried a rhythm, like someone patiently waiting for me to answer. My skin tightened. Pipes, I muttered under my breath. But the words didn't convince even me. To clear my head, I got up and moved into the kitchen. I busied myself with a glass of water, the cool hum of the refrigerator oddly comforting. That's when I heard it again. Knock, 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 this time from the kitchen wall directly beside me. I froze, glass trembling in my hand. It had followed me. At that moment, a pit opened in my stomach. My rational thoughts, pipes, settling wood, the usual excuses, started unraveling. Pipes don't follow you. Creaks don't move rooms. Whatever this was, it wanted me to notice. The knocking grew faster, sharper, echoing inside the walls as if something was moving behind them. I fled into the dining room, but before I could even catch my breath, pounding erupted from the wall near the table. Bang! 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 I staggered back, heart thundering, watching the plaster shudder slightly on impact, as if fists were slamming from inside. No, I said aloud, my voice trembling. No, this isn't real. But the pounding continued, spreading, multiplying. Kitchen wall, dining wall, living room wall. All around me, urgent, chaotic, as if dozens of fists were slamming, demanding, begging to come out. My hands shook violently. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where could I go? The sound was everywhere. It filled the house, the walls groaning and rattling under the assault. My safe little home turned into a prison of noise, and then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence dropped heavy, unnatural. My ears rang in the absence of sound. I barely dared to breathe, every nerve in me waiting for the next strike. It didn't come. Instead, a soft voice whispered from inside the living room wall, muffled but chillingly clear. "Let me out." I staggered backward, slamming into the dining chair. My mouth went dry. I must have misheard, my terrified mind twisting the sound. But then, again, "Let me out." My body shook from head to toe. It wasn't just a voice. It was pleading, angry, desperate. Without realizing it, I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy candlestick, and hurled it at the wall. It struck with a dull thud and fell, useless. The wall stood silent, but not for long. The pounding resumed, violent now, shaking the frames hung on the plaster. This time, it wasn't limited to a single spot. The blows came from all directions, surrounding me. The whole house thrummed, like it was alive and trying to claw its way out of itself. I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted for the front door, fumbling with the lock, my fingers slippery with sweat. Behind me, the pounding grew frantic, the walls reverberating as if they would burst. And then, just as I yanked the door open, the voice returned, louder, deeper, rasping with rage. "You can't leave!" The lights above me flickered wildly. I stumbled onto the porch, gasping desperately for air. Outside, the night was calm, quiet, the quietest I'd ever heard it. I spun around, staring at my house. From the outside, everything looked normal, perfectly still. A stranger would never have guessed the chaos I'd just escaped. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't move. My eyes were glued to the windows, to the thin veil of glass that separated me from whatever lived inside, because I could still hear it, faint, muffled, but growing angrier. The pounding hadn't stopped. The house itself was breathing heavy now, as though it knew I wouldn't stay away forever. And I don't know what's worse, the thought of leaving it behind forever, or the gut-deep fear that no matter where I go, the knocking will find me again. Because when I pressed my ear to the air outside, I swear I could hear it faintly in the ground beneath my feet. It was already spreading. Story 3. I used to think the scariest sounds one could ever hear are screams in the dark, but I was wrong. The sound that terrifies me more than anything else is knocking, soft, patient knocks from inside walls where no one should be. It was a quiet evening, the kind where time feels slow and the silence presses against your ears. I was stretched out on the couch, scrolling through my phone, half distracted and half bored. That's when I heard it for the first time. Knock, knock, knock. I frowned and glanced at the living room wall. It wasn't loud, just a soft rapping sound like knuckles against wood. More curious than afraid, I told myself it was the pipes. Old houses make noises all the time. I turned back to my phone and dismissed it. But the sound came again. Louder this time, more deliberate, knock, knock, knock. The rhythm was too steady, too human. A chill ran through me as I set my phone down. I told myself not to be stupid. Pipes, rats, maybe even the wind against the siding. But then it stopped, and the silence that followed was heavy, waiting, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I shook my head and tried to brush it off. To distract myself, I got up and walked into the kitchen. But the moment I stepped in, it came again. Knock, knock, knock. From the kitchen wall. As if whatever was inside the living room wall had shifted, sliding through the house to follow me. My chest tightened. That wasn't normal. That wasn't pipes. I hurried into the dining room, trying to laugh it off nervously, but the laughter died in my throat when the sound followed. Sharper now. Urgent. Bang, bang, bang. The walls seemed to shake with the force. It was no longer a polite tapping, but heavy fists slamming from inside. I stumbled back, staring in disbelief as the paintings on the walls trembled. It was everywhere at once, in the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, like whatever was inside was racing through the veins of the house, growing desperate. I pressed my hands against my ears, whispering, "This isn't real. This isn't real." But it was. I ran back into the living room and stood frozen in the middle of the floor. The pounding surrounded me, rapid and violent, until finally it stopped, and for the first time, there was a voice, a muffled, hoarse whisper from deep inside the wall. "Let me out." The words were low, dragging, soaked in rage and hunger. My knees went weak. I wanted to scream, but my voice got caught in my throat. My whole body trembled as I realized it hadn't been random noises at all. Someone, or something, was trapped behind the plaster, begging to be free. "No, no, you're not real," I whispered to the empty room. My voice shook so badly it didn't sound like mine. But then the voice came again. louder this time, each word punctuated by new pounding from inside the wall. Let me out. The walls rattled, dust dripping from the ceiling. I backed up toward the front door, fumbling with the lock. The whole house roared with sound now, fists slamming from the inside as though the thing was trying to punch its way into the light. Every wall shook, every room trembled, and then silence. Too sudden, too complete. I froze by the door, waiting. My breathing was fast and shallow. For a second I thought it was over, that maybe my mind had cracked under exhaustion, until a new sound started. Scratching. Long, deep scratches traveling up the inside of the wall, high above the pictures, up past the light fixtures, dragging along the ceiling as if it were crawling overhead, circling the room. My stomach dropped into ice. Then I heard breathing. Not mine. Heavy, wet, and desperate. Coming from inside the wall directly behind me. I broke. In a frenzy, I threw the door open and bolted outside into the cold air, stumbling barefoot across the front porch. The night was quiet, eerily calm. The silence of the neighborhood felt wrong, too heavy, almost as if every house on the street was watching me. When I turned back, my blood ran cold. In the living room window, beyond the curtains, I saw it. A pale, malformed hand pressing against the glass from inside. The fingers were long, almost skeletal, clawing at the barrier. Behind it, a faint shadow shifted, wrong in shape, wrong in movement, as though it didn't belong in this world at all. I didn't wait to see more. I ran into the street, heart pounding in my ears, legs barely carrying me. I didn't stop. Not for blocks. But here's the part that haunts me still. Later that night, when I finally returned with the police, they found nothing. The house was silent. The walls were intact. No marks, no damage. No signs of anyone being there. They told me it must have been a dream, or my imagination playing tricks. But when they left, I walked through the empty rooms one last time, and in the silence, I heard it again. Knock, 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 this time from the wall behind my bed. Story 4. I never thought silence could be so loud. That night, silence wasn't just the absence of sound. It felt alive, pressing on my skin, squeezing into my chest like invisible hands. I had gone to bed late after scrolling on my phone, the kind of night where exhaustion makes you careless. But thirst woke me. A simple need for water pulled me out of my warm sheets. That's all it was supposed to be. A sleepy walk to the kitchen, nothing more. But something was waiting for me. I rubbed my eyes and padded down the stairs in the dark, soft carpet, swallowing my steps. The air was cool and heavy. At first, I didn't notice it. I was halfway down the stairs, yawning, when a faint movement caught my attention. The front door. It was wide open, swaying gently on its hinges. I froze. A bolt of ice ran down my spine. No, that wasn't right. I remembered locking it earlier. I always did. It was muscle memory at this point. Twist the key, flip the latch, tug twice to be sure. I never forgot. But there it was. Open, the dark mouth of night spilling into my home. I stood on the stairs for what felt like minutes, panic battling reason. Finally, with legs heavier than stone, I forced myself down. Maybe I hadn't locked it after all. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. That explanation was safer than the alternatives. My hand shook as I pushed the door closed, the hinge groaning. I twisted the lock tightly and yanked down on the handle 3 times just to be sure. Locked, secure. I turned away quickly, desperate to get back upstairs and forget what I'd seen. The silence pressed heavier on me as I climbed the steps, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. And then, click. The sound was unmistakable, the lock turning. I spun back around, heart slamming hard enough to make me dizzy. From the landing above, I could see it, my front door slowly swinging open again, revealing the endless dark outside. My fingers went numb, my breath shallow and sharp. I rushed back down, panic overriding everything else. The door was wide open now, swaying slightly, as if something invisible had slipped through just before I reached it. I slammed it shut again, twisted the lock with such force my fingers hurt, and pressed my whole body against the wood. My skin burned with the cold seeping through it. "Stay shut. Stay shut," I whispered, as if I could command the door with my voice. For a long, suffocating minute, nothing happened. Silence again. Reluctantly, I pulled away, my hand still hovering near the handle. Slowly, carefully, I walked backward up the stairs, my eyes never leaving the door. I was almost at the top when it moved. The handle twitched, just slightly, and then it turned. Deliberately. Slowly. Click. The lock slid open. The door eased outward, creaking into the night again. This time I didn't move. I couldn't. I stood frozen halfway up the stairs, staring at the gaping doorway, my breath caught in my throat. What was I supposed to do? Run? Confront whatever had just unlocked my door? Call for help? But no sound left my body. I just stood there, the open dark yawning at me, waiting. And then I heard it. Not outside, not in the distance. Inside. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. On the floorboards by the door, thud, thud, thud. The sound moved just beyond the frame, hidden in the shadows. I strained my eyes, but the darkness seemed to breathe, thick and impenetrable. Yet the steps were inside. I could hear the wood groan under invisible weight. I backed up the rest of the stairs in a rush, tripping slightly until I stumbled into the safety of the hallway above. My first instinct was to run to the bedroom, close the door, hide under the covers like a child. But what then? Wouldn't that just trap me? From below, the creaking stopped. The silence came back, heavier than before, suffocating. I dared to peek over the banister. The door was closed, perfectly shut. But I hadn't shut it. My heart stopped. This wasn't just someone messing with me. Someone would slam the door, make noise, make chaos. This was different. This was precise. Patient, like it was playing with me. I stumbled back into my bedroom, shutting the door and locking it. My chest heaved as though I'd run a marathon. I pressed my ear to the door, straining. For a long while, nothing. The kind of silence that is worse than screams, because it lets your imagination do the screaming for you. I must have stayed like that for an hour, trembling, waiting. And then, just as I began to think I'd imagined it all, from the hallway, right outside my bedroom door, I heard the lock of the front door downstairs turn again. Click. Then the slow creak of it opening, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps climbing the stairs. And they haven't stopped yet. Story 5. I have never trusted mirrors. Something about them has always unsettled me, not because of superstition, but because of the way they stare back. Cold glass, an endless copy of reality, yet never quite the same. A mirror shows what's there, but I can't shake the feeling it holds something else too, something patient, waiting just beneath the surface. That fear became real on the night I saw myself betray me. It was past midnight. I couldn't sleep, so I decided to brush my teeth, telling myself the small routine would calm me. The bathroom light buzzed faintly, throwing a pale glow across the tiles. Everything seemed normal, or at least it should have. As I scrubbed tiredly, I lifted my eyes to the mirror. What I saw froze me. My reflection was smiling. My face was not. My lips hung neutral, maybe tired. But in the glass, my reflection's mouth stretched ever so slightly upward, an eerie, too-wide grin. For a heartbeat, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I blinked hard, rubbed at my face, and looked again. The smile was still there. A prickling chill raced across my skin. My hand trembled, but I kept brushing, forcing myself to act normal. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe my brain was glitching. And then it got worse. My reflection began to move just a split second behind me. When I raised the toothbrush to rinse, it lagged. When I leaned to spit into the sink, it followed too late, like it was learning how to copy me but failing. I dropped the toothbrush, foam spilling down my chin. My reflection didn't drop its brush. Instead, it stood there, grinning, still brushing slowly, staring at me. I stumbled back, heart pounding, my breath catching painfully in my throat. For seconds that stretched endlessly, I didn't move. Neither did it. Then, slowly, so slowly it made my stomach turn, my reflection stopped mimicking entirely. I took a shaky step forward. The reflection did not. Its grin widened, unnatural, sharp, almost mocking. I leaned closer, desperate and terrified, whispering to myself, "This isn't real. Come on, get a grip." The reflection leaned back, deliberately, as if avoiding me. Its head tilted too far to the side, bones bending in angles no human neck should allow, and then its lips parted. They moved silently, mouthing words I couldn't hear. My skin crawled. I pressed closer, trying to read what it was trying to say, but the movements were warped, inhumanly exaggerated, like a grotesque pantomime. I whispered, "What? What are you saying?" There was no sound. Only that twisted grin, those moving lips, over and over as if chanting something I wasn't meant to understand. And then I noticed something worse. The mirror behind my reflection darkened. Not the room. I could still see the soft light of the bulb behind me in the real world. But in the glass, the background was bleeding into shadow, thick and heavy. My reflection stood in a dimness I wasn't standing in. It was like the glass had become a window into someplace else, somewhere darker. I staggered back in horror, nearly tripping against the wall. My eyes burned with tears I hadn't realized were gathering. Fear pulsed through me so strong it made me nauseous. I wanted to run, to slam the bathroom door and pretend I hadn't seen, but I couldn't, because the reflection stopped mouthing words and pressed its hand against the inside of the glass. My breath caught. The surface of the mirror rippled faintly like water disturbed by a drop. I screamed, stumbling backward, slamming my shoulder into the bathroom door. My toothbrush clattered into the sink basin. My own reflection had vanished. What stared back at me now wasn't me anymore, but a warped, grinning version of my face, its eyes blacker than the shadowed glass behind it. For a long, agonizing moment, it just watched. Head tilted, grin wider than my skin would ever allow. And then, it mouthed one final word. Clear this time. Soon. I slammed the bathroom light off and bolted into my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I sat on the bed, knees pulled up, trembling in the dark. For hours, I didn't move, heart hammering like a drum. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under into a restless sleep. When the sun came, flooding the room with safety, I finally gathered the nerve to peek back into the bathroom. The mirror looked perfectly normal. My reflection was mine again. Every blink, every movement matched. I almost laughed then, the kind of nervous laugh that comes when you're clinging to sanity. Maybe it had been a nightmare, a hallucination. Maybe I was unraveling under stress. But when I looked closer, my stomach turned to ice. My reflection's lips were wet, faintly stained as though it had been whispering against the glass all night, and as I stood there, pale and shaking, its mouth twitched. For the briefest second, it smiled again, before following me perfectly, like nothing had ever happened, and I realized the truth. The mirror isn't just glass, it's a cage, and something inside it wants out. Story 6. I've heard that living alone makes you more aware of every sound your house makes. The wind pushing against the siding, the pipes sighing, the wood contracting with age. People tell you it's just part of the quiet. But what no one warns you about is when sounds break the silence that aren't supposed to be there. For me, it started with a hum. It was late, close to midnight. I'd finished my dinner hours ago and buried myself in a book on the couch. The house was still. Too still. Even the refrigerator seemed to quiet down, like it was afraid of making noise. And then, through that silence, I heard it. A tune. Soft. Wordless humming. I froze, every part of me suddenly alert. The sound came from upstairs, the exact part of the house I knew should be empty. At first, I told myself maybe it drifted in from outside. A late-night wanderer, a neighbor, something mundane I could explain. Houses trick you like that. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't outside. The sound had weight. It lived in the walls of my home. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The hum continued, low, melodic, almost playful. But then gradually, it shifted. Notes stretched into words. Words formed into verses. It wasn't humming anymore. It was singing a lullaby. Sweet, but wrong. The kind of wrong that tightens your skin and makes your blood cold. I didn't recognize the tune or its language, but the rising and falling rhythm was unmistakably aimed to soothe. Meant for a child. Only, I was alone, and I had no children. The book slipped from my hands as I sat paralyzed, listening. Part of me wanted to run. Another part thought, if I run, they'll hear me. So I sat there, staring at the shadowed banister across the living room, where the stairs disappeared into darkness. The lullaby drifted closer to an end, each note held too long, vibrating in my chest. And then, silence. Not the natural kind. This silence was intentional, sharp, predatory, as if someone upstairs had stopped because they knew I was listening. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched from above. I don't know what compelled me, fear, stubbornness, stupidity, but I couldn't stay rooted to the couch any longer. Slowly rising, I made my way toward the staircase. Each step on the creaking floor seemed loud enough to announce me. My eyes clung to the dark top of the stairs, waiting for anything. I reached the bottom step. The air felt heavier here, colder. The silence pressed down harder. The hairs on my arms rose. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice startling me in the suffocating stillness. Nothing answered. Not a movement. Not a sound. I placed one foot on the stair. The wood groaned, echoing up into the darkness. I thought I saw something shift at the top, just for an instant, a shadow twitching against deeper shadows. I froze, bile rising in my throat. Every beat of my heart pounded so hard it almost hurt. Then, just as I lifted my second foot onto the stair, it began again. The lullaby. But this time it wasn't coming from upstairs. It was right behind me. I whipped around, almost slipping. The living room was empty, bathed in soft light from my lamp. No one was there. The room was still, calm, unchanged. But the song was clear, whispered directly into my ear. My legs nearly gave out, panic flooding through me. With every ounce of trembling willpower, I backed up the staircase, keeping my eyes strafing between the dark above and the emptiness below. The voice stopped again. And then, it laughed. A soft, breathy chuckle that slid into the air and died as quickly as it came. That was enough. I didn't wait another second. I bolted up the stairs, stupidly thinking I could lock myself in my room and be safe. I slammed the door, turned the lock, pressed my body against it. For a moment, silence again. My chest burned from holding my breath. My ears strained against nothing, desperate for clues. And then, faintly, from inside the room itself, the lullaby began anew. My head snapped toward the closet. Muffled. Quiet. Coming from inside there. "Stop," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "Please stop." The song grew louder, fuller, as if answering me. My whole body shook like it might come apart at the seams. And then, beneath the melody, I heard something worse. More voices, joining in, layering and stacking behind the first until it wasn't a lone singer anymore but a chorus, hundreds of voices spilling from my closet, chanting that cursed lullaby. The door rattled. My lock clicked once, twice, as though invisible fingers were testing it. I don't remember how long I stood there pressed against the wall, trembling in the dark, whispering prayers I hadn't spoken since childhood. But at some point, the singing stopped. When I woke the next morning, the house was still. Bright. Normal. But I don't trust it. Because last night, they sang to me. And the worst part? I can't get the tune out of my head. It's still there, buried in my thoughts. And sometimes, when I walk through the house, I swear I hear myself humming it without realizing. For more stories like this, share and subscribe, Goofy Horror.